The morning greeted me with the usual silence. 76 years old is no joke, but I always thought that age was just a number on a passport. Every morning I wake up at 6 sharp, exercise, and make strong tea no coffee. It messes up my blood pressure. Today is no exception, although for the past 3 weeks my routine seems like a meaningless ritual. Beatrice is gone. My daughter's death didn't hit the way I expected it to. There was no ripping pain or tantrums. Instead, there was a numbness and a lingering sense of incompleteness, as if a conversation had been cut off halfway through. That was how Beatrice and I always ended our conversations, though. I put the kettle on and took out my day planner, black with gold embossing. I used to write down everything in it, from meetings with coworkers to grocery lists. Now the pages are blank. 40 years of teaching physics at Zionsville College had accustomed me to order, but now I couldn't bring myself to plan even the next day. A phone call cut through the silence. I shuddered. Few people call this early. Miriam Price speaking. My voice sounded as steady as a lecture. Good morning, Mrs. Price. This is Randall Hopkins from the notary's office. I'm sorry to call you so early, but the probate papers are ready. Can you come down here today? Inheritance. That's a strange word. Beatrice left me an inheritance, as if she was preparing to leave, even though the aneurysm took her instantly, without warning. Would 11 o'clock be okay? I asked, making a note in my day planner. Perfect. I'll see you then. I hung up the phone and looked out the window at the empty street. Zionsville was slow to wake up. It was a small town where everyone knew each other and where Beatrice and I had lived most of our lives. Only she had the courage to leave twice, first for college in Portland, then with that musician of hers, Noah. Each time she came back, but a different one. That period when she was 16 still stood before her eyes. Beatrice with black hair instead of light blonde. Beatrice slamming the door. Beatrice screaming, "You never let me breathe." I was a strict mother. Yes, I admit it. But is that a bad thing? I wanted the best for my daughter. I wanted her to get ahead in life, get a good education, find a reliable husband. Instead, she became a school teacher and married Noah Abbott, who made a living on his guitar. The kettle whistled, bringing me back to reality. Outside the window, a neighbor, Ethel Bishop, appeared, walking her pug. When she saw me, she waved her hand with a look of condolence on her face. I nodded back. Over the past weeks, I'd learned to accept sympathetic looks without blinking. After breakfast, I changed into a dark blue dress, austere but not mournful. I'd never liked the color black. I carefully tucked my gray hair into a bun and put on simple pearl earrings, a gift from my husband for our 20th anniversary. Henry has been gone for 8 years, but I still wear those earrings to important meetings. The Hopkins notary's office was 3 blocks from my house. The weather was clear, so I decided to walk. Zionsville hadn't changed in decades. The same neat houses with manicured lawns, the same bakery on the corner of Maple Street, the same fountain in the main square. Only the people had changed. Or was it me who had changed? Randall Hopkins, a young man with prematurely thinning hair, greeted me with a polite smile. "Mrs. Price, please have a seat. All the paperwork is ready." He spread the folders of papers on the table. "As you know, your daughter left a will. According to her will, you get her house in Zionsville and a vacation home on Cedar Lake. The bank account and most of her personal effects go to her husband, Noah Abbott." I nodded. Nothing unexpected, really. "What about the cottage?" I asked. I'd never even been there. Randall fixed his glasses. "You own the cottage outright. Here are the documents that require your signature." I mechanically signed the papers, thinking about the cottage. Beatrice had bought it 15 years ago with Noah, a little house by the lake, 40 minutes from the city. She never invited me there. In fact, she always found reasons not to invite me. Mom, there are no facilities for you there, she said. The house is small, the amenities are minimal, you won't be comfortable, or we're renovating, everything's dusty and dirty. Some other time, and when I insisted, Noah would intervene with that lazy smile of his. Miriam, you know how Bee loves her space. It's our little sanctuary. Sanctuary. Who were they hiding from? Me? A memory pops up as an uninvited guest. Beatrice, 13 years old, writing something in a notebook. I look over her shoulder and she slams it shut with such force that the pencil breaks. Mom, this is private. A daughter shouldn't have secrets from her mother, I said. How wrong I was. Beatrice always had secrets. Mrs. Price? Randall's voice brought me back to the present. Here are the keys to the cottage and the address. All the utilities are paid by the end of the year. I took the keys, a plain keychain with a cedar cone key ring. Thank you, Mr. Hopkins. Leaving the office, I sat down on a bench in a small square and opened a folder with documents. Cedar Lake, Lot 12. I'd never understood why they needed that house. Beatrice worked as a history teacher at the local school, teaching extra classes, sometimes taking night shifts at the 24-hour college library. Noah occasionally performed in bars in neighboring towns with his band. When were they ever going to the country? I noticed, though, that every Friday Beatrice left and didn't return until Sunday night. Noah and I are vacationing in the country, she would say when I asked, and no more details. Now the dacha was mine, and I could finally see this mysterious place. But why? To sell it, of course. I don't need a country house, especially one with so much mystery attached to it. On my way home, I stopped at the grocery store. Cassie, the young cashier, looked at me with the same sympathy as her neighbor that morning. How are you, Mrs. Price? She asked, punching in my modest purchase. Fine, thank you, I replied dryly. I hate that question. What do I have to answer? That I wake up at night and listen for the phone to ring, even though I know Beatrice will never call again? We all miss Miss Abbott so much, Cassie continued, not noticing my tone. She was the best history teacher ever. You know, she's the reason I got into college. She always believed in me. I nodded, feeling a pang of guilt. Beatrice was a good teacher, that much I knew. But to hear that she believed in her students when I myself rarely expressed faith in her. Say hello to Mr. Abbott, Cassie added, handing me the package. Sure, I lied. Noah and I hadn't spoken since the funeral. He'd avoided me, and I hadn't sought him out. Beatrice had been our only connection, and now that connection was gone. At home, I put away the groceries and sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. On the refrigerator hung the only picture of Beatrice and me that looked really happy. A trip to Yellowstone Park when she was 10, before the teenage rebellion, before college, before Noah. She smiles at the camera, showing the gap between her front teeth. I stand next to her, putting my arm around her shoulders. Back then, I could still hug her. Then the touches became infrequent and awkward, and in recent years have been limited to formal kisses on the cheek when meeting and saying goodbye. When did that happen? When did we become strangers to each other? Maybe when I insisted she go to law school, even though she wanted to study literature. Or when I mocked her first poem published in the school paper. Poetry doesn't feed, Beatrice. You need a serious profession. She tore up the paper and didn't speak to me for a week. Or perhaps when she brought home Noah, long-haired, with an earring in his ear and tattoos. I remember looking at him over his glasses and thinking, this is the wages of my sins. Beatrice married him out of spite 3 months after they met. She was 26, he was 32. I didn't attend the wedding. I wasn't invited. We reconciled later when she returned to Zionsville and got a job in school. But it was a fragile truce, full of innuendos and careful phrases. We were careful not to broach sore subjects. I didn't criticize Noah. She didn't remind me of her youthful dreams. And yet, in 15 years of marriage, Beatrice had never once invited me to their cottage. When I asked, she would get tense. Mama, this is our place with Noah. Please respect it. And I would back down, though inside I was seething with resentment and curiosity. What were they doing there? Why such secrecy? I looked at the keys to the dacha lying on the table. Now I could go there, see with my own eyes this mysterious place, and then sell it and close this chapter. But first, I have to get ready. Tomorrow, I'll go to the real estate office, get a ballpark price. Then I'll go to the cottage, do an inventory, remove Beatrice's personal belongings. And maybe I'll finally realize what my daughter has been hiding from me all these years. I stroked the picture on the refrigerator. Beatrice smiled at me with a gap between her teeth, keeping her secrets even after her death. What have you been hiding from me, daughter? I whispered into the emptiness of the kitchen. Silence was my answer. The next morning, I decided to call Noah. No matter how I felt about my daughter's choice, he had been her husband for 15 years. We were to discuss the inheritance, especially the summer house. I dialed the number and the receiver was picked up after the sixth ringtone. Silence, then a quiet sigh. Noah? It's Miriam. I know. His voice sounded muffled, as if from underwater. What do you want? I need to talk to you about the cottage on Cedar Lake. I got the inheritance papers. A pause. I could almost see him frowning, rubbing his silver earring, a habit that had always annoyed me. I'm not ready to discuss this right now, he finally said. Noah. I tried to keep my voice soft. I realize this is a difficult time for all of us, but you don't understand, he cut me off. You've never understood B or me, and now is not the time to start. I'm going to sell the cottage, I said bluntly. I don't want it, and I thought, I don't want it, don't sell. His voice suddenly became tense. Please, not now. That surprised me. Why was he so attached to this place? Is there some kind of valuables stored there? Or is it something else? Can I at least stop by, see what's in there? Long pause. I could hear him breathing. Do whatever you want, Miriam. It's your property now. But, he hesitated, if you decide to sell, let me know. Yeah, I'd like to pick up some things. What kind of things? B's personal effects. You don't want them. There was a familiar hostility in his voice, and I felt a wave of irritation rising in me. She was my daughter, Noah. You don't get to decide what I need or don't need. She was my wife, and you never really knew her. Before I could answer, he hung up. I sat staring at the phone, feeling my hands shake with anger and, surprisingly, pain. You never really knew her. Was that really true? I remembered our last meeting with Beatrice, a week before she died. An ordinary Sunday lunch. She brought apple pie. We drank tea and talked about nothing. The weather, the new bakery downtown, her students. Nothing personal, nothing deep. And yet, I noticed that she checked her phone often, as if she were waiting for an important message. Is something wrong? I asked her that day. No, Mom. Just waiting for a message from a colleague about tomorrow's class. I didn't believe it, but I didn't insist. We had an unspoken rule about staying out of each other's lives. Now I was regretting that rule. What else had I missed? What else had I dismissed as none of my business? My thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of the doorbell. Ethel stood on the doorstep with a basket of homemade cookies. I thought I'd drop in and check on you, she said, coming into the kitchen uninvited. We weren't close friends, but we'd lived in the neighborhood for 30 years. Ethel knew everything about everyone in Zionsville, the local newspaper on two legs. I'm all right, I replied demurely, putting the kettle on. You know, she began, sitting down at the table. I saw Noah yesterday. He was packing up Beatrice's house. He looked awful. I didn't say anything. I didn't feel like discussing Noah. I'm sorry you never got along with him, Ethel went on, not noticing my discomfort. Beatrice was always worried about it. How do you know? I asked, sharper than I intended. Ethel blinked. Dash? Well, people say, who exactly? Willa Kincaid, for instance. He and Beatrice were close. The kettle's boiling, Miriam. I turned the kettle off, thinking about Willa Kincaid, a short woman with short-cropped gray hair and bright green eyes. She taught music at the same school as Beatrice. As far as I knew, they were friends, but I never thought they were close enough to discuss family problems. Did Willa know Beatrice well? I asked, pouring the tea. Oh, very well, Ethel confirmed, pulling her cup toward her. They often traveled together to some concert in Portland or Seattle, and Willa used to go to their cottage. She said it was lovely there, especially in the fall. I froze with the kettle in my hand. Willa's been to the cottage, the one I'd never been invited to? Ethel, do you know where Willa is now? Is she still teaching? Of course. The neighbor nodded, clearly pleased with my sudden interest. She's in charge of the music department now. They have classes until 3 o'clock today, I think. After Ethel left, I called the school to find out Willa's exact schedule. Then I changed into a stricter outfit, a dark green dress and jacket. I was going to pay a visit to someone who probably knew my daughter better than I did. The school hadn't changed since Beatrice had been there. The same brick walls, the same wide hallways with rows of lockers. I walked past the history room where my daughter taught, and for a moment I imagined her there, explaining the Civil War or the Great Depression to teenagers. The music room was at the end of the hallway. The door was ajar, and from there came the sounds of a piano. I knocked and entered. Willa was sitting at the instrument, playing the keys with a pensive expression on her face. When she saw me, she stopped and slowly closed the piano lid. Miriam, she said, not a question, not a greeting, a simple statement. Hello, Willa. I hope I'm not interrupting. No, class just ended. She pointed to the chair next to her. Have a seat. I've been waiting for you to come. You were? It took me by surprise. Noah said you called him about the cottage. I sat down, feeling my shoulders tense. Are you two in touch? Of course we do. We're friends. Willa looked at me carefully. What can I do for you, Miriam? I decided not to beat around the bush. Ethel said you've been to Beatrice and Noah's cottage. Willa nodded. Many times. It's a special place. Special? How? She looked away, staring at the music sheets on the lectern. That's not for me to tell, Miriam. Will ya? I stepped forward. My daughter died. I inherited a cottage I know almost nothing about, except that I've never been invited there. Noah won't talk to me. You seem to be the only person who can clarify the situation. Willa was silent for a long time, as if weighing something in his mind. Beatrice loved you very much, she said at last. But there was always a wall between you. She had built it to protect herself, her real self. Protect me from what? My voice trembled. What did I do wrong? It's not what you did wrong. It's what you didn't do at all. You never tried to figure out who she really was. You saw her as an extension of yourself, not a separate person with her own dreams. The words hurt more than I expected. I wanted to object, but I couldn't find an argument. Wasn't that what Beatrice herself had told me in those rare moments when we actually talked? What was she keeping from me? I asked quietly. What had happened at that cottage? Willa stood up and walked over to the closet against the wall. She took out a folder and handed it to me. Here's the program from last year's festival in Portland. Look at page 17. I opened the glossy booklet. Northwest Folk Festival, the cover said. I flipped to the indicated page and froze. There was a picture of a woman on stage with a guitar. Long dark hair, familiar profile, but the expression on her face I'd never seen on my daughter's face. absolute freedom and joy. The caption under the photo read, Blaze is a rising star in the Northwest folk scene. Blaze? I whispered. Dash Beatrice's stage name, Willa explained. She wrote songs, Miriam. Amazing songs. And she performed them. I couldn't take my eyes off the picture. My daughter, on stage, with a guitar, singing. I didn't know she played guitar. Noah taught her when they first met. She was very capable. And the lyrics? Willa shook her head. There was so much life in her lyrics, so much truth. People cried at her performances. Why didn't she tell me? The question came out of my mouth, though deep down I knew the answer. Willa gently took the booklet from my hands. When Beatrice was 16, she showed you a poem she'd written. Do you remember what she said? I closed my eyes, trying to remember. It was so long ago. I said that poetry doesn't feed, that she needed a real profession. You said it was a waste of time, Willa corrected. That she had no talent, and that if she wanted to do anything with her life, she should leave this nonsense behind. I shuddered. Was I really that cruel? She never showed you any more of her poems or songs after that, Willa continued. But she didn't stop writing. She just learned to hide that part of herself from you. And the cottage, what does she have to do with it? Willa sighed. She and Noah had set up a studio there. They recorded songs, rehearsed. Sometimes they'd put on little concerts for friends and fans. It was their sanctuary, you know, a place where Beatrice could be herself. I felt a strange mixture of bitterness and curiosity growing inside. My daughter led a double life. To me, she was a school teacher, a married woman with an ordinary life. And to others, she was a singer, a songwriter, a creative person. Did she have fans? I asked, still unable to get my head around it. Not many, but devoted. The last album she and Noah released on vinyl was a small run, sold out in a week. An album? My voice broke. She had albums? 3, Willa nodded. Quiet Rooms, Behind Closed Doors, and Caged Bird. The last one came out 6 months ago. The titles were like stabs to the heart, especially the last one. Was she writing about me? I asked, even though I was afraid to hear the answer. Willa looked at me sympathetically. Beatrice wrote about her life, about her feelings. You were an important part of that life, Miriam. But don't listen to me. Listen to her. Go to the cottage. You'll find all the answers there. Noah doesn't want me to go there, I said. Noah is grieving, but he knows it has to happen sooner or later. Beatrice left the cottage to you for a reason. Perhaps it was her way of finally showing you who she really was. We talked some more. Willa told me how she and Beatrice had met at the school concert, how they had quickly hit it off, how Beatrice trusted her with her first songs, how she was afraid to show them to the public, but Noah insisted. Their first performance in a small cafe in Portland, a gradually growing circle of fans. You know, Willa said as she walked me toward the exit, Beatrice was going to tell you. She'd been talking about it a lot in recent months, that she was tired of secrets, that she wanted her mom to know what she was really proud of in her life. Why didn't she do this sooner? Fear, Miriam. Fear that you'll say it's a waste of time again, that it wasn't serious, that she's disappointed you. I wouldn't say that, I said, but even to my own ears it sounded unconvincing. Willa just shook her head. Go to the cottage, Miriam. Meet your daughter. When I left the school, I sat in the car for a long time, unable to start the engine. My mind was reeling with bits and pieces of my conversation with Willa. Beatrice is a singer. Beatrice writes songs. Beatrice, who I thought was practical and down to earth, led a secret creative life. I pulled out my phone and opened the search engine. I typed in Blaze folk singer. To my surprise, several links popped up. an article about a festival in Portland, a mention on a music blog, even a page on a site dedicated to indie musicians. I opened the page. There was the same photo as in the booklet and a brief bio. Blaze, real name withheld, is a folk singer-songwriter from the Pacific Northwest. Her music combines traditional folk motifs with contemporary lyrics exploring themes of freedom, repression, and finding one's own voice. 3 released albums, appearances at regional festivals, works with her husband and producer known as Ghost. Ghost, that must be Noah. Below was a list of concerts, the last one dated 2 months ago, shortly before Beatrice's death. The Bluebird Club in Portland. I didn't even know she'd traveled there. The phone vibrated, interrupting my thoughts. A message from Willa. Here's the address of the summer house if you can't find it in the paperwork. And the gate code, 84791. Beatrice would want you to know. I glanced at the clock. It wasn't even 5 o'clock yet. I could make it to Cedar Lake before sundown. The decision matured instantly. I'd start the car and drive to the cottage, right now. Find out what my daughter had kept from me all these years. See the place where she was truly happy. It won't bring her back. It won't undo our mistakes. But maybe it'll give me a chance to finally realize who my daughter really was. I started the engine and drove out of the school parking lot, heading toward Cedar Lake, toward Beatrice's secret life. The road to Cedar Lake wound through dense forests and small towns. I drove slowly, looking at the signs and checking the map. I had never been to these places before, even though Zionsville was only 40 minutes away. Another small example of how Beatrice had walled off her life from mine. The sun was already setting when I turned onto the narrow dirt road that led to the lake. A wall of majestic cedars stood all around, casting long shadows on the road. It was getting darker inside the car, and I turned on the headlights even though it was still daytime. My thoughts involuntarily returned to Beatrice. What had made her so careful to hide her art from me? I remembered an incident when she was 14. We were walking in the park, and she stopped to listen to a street musician, a gray-bearded man with a worn guitar. He was playing something folky with a simple but catchy motif. Beatrice stood mesmerized, and when he finished, she threw all her change into his hat. Dash, that was beautiful, she told him. Do you have any recordings? The musician smiled and handed her a tattered disc in a homemade package. Beatrice reached for her purse, but I intervened. Why do you need it? You'd better buy something worthwhile. You don't even have a CD player. But Mom, don't waste your money on nonsense. She looked at me with a look of disappointment that made me feel bad, but I didn't give in. The musician nodded understandingly, put the disc away, and we moved on. That night I found Beatrice in her room, crying on her pillow. What's wrong? I asked, stroking her back. Nothing, she answered through her tears. Because of that disc? But honey, it's just a hobo with a guitar. She sat up on the bed, looking at me with red eyes. He's not a hobo. He's an artist, and his music moved me. It's just sentimental nonsense aimed at impressionable girls like you, I tried to explain. The real art is Mozart, Beethoven, not these street howls. You don't understand, she whispered and turned away from me. I'd written it off as teenage angst. Now, on my way to my daughter's hiding place, I remembered the scene with painful clarity. Perhaps that was when she had decided never to share her love of music with me. The navigator announced that I had reached my destination. In front of me was a view of the small bay of Cedar Lake. By the water, among the pines, stood a wooden house, not too big, but with character. A wide veranda wrapped around it on 2 sides, and large windows reflected the last rays of the sun. I stopped the car on the gravel lot, and for a while I just sat there, looking at the house. Beatrice and Noah had bought it 15 years ago. 15 years of secret living away from my eyes. The front door was locked with a combination lock. I entered the combination Willa had sent, 84791. The lock clicked, the green light flashed, and the door ajar. I took a deep breath, gathering my strength, and pushed the door open. The first thing I noticed was the smell, a mixture of wood, cedar scent, and something else. Coffee? Dust? Leather? I turned on the light and froze on the threshold, shocked by the view that opened up. This wasn't just a summer house. It was a studio, a real music studio. The spacious living room was divided into two areas. On the far side stood musical instruments, two acoustic guitars on stands, an electric guitar, a small drum kit, and keyboards. Near the wall, you could see recording equipment, a mixing console, a computer, microphones on stands, headphones. Closer to the entrance, there was a cozy sitting area with a worn leather sofa, armchairs, and a low wooden table piled with music sheets and notebooks. But it was the walls that shocked me the most. They were hung with posters, photographs, posters, and on most of them was Beatrice, my daughter, whom I didn't know at all. Here she is on a small stage with a guitar in her hands, eyes closed, her face expressing a passion like I had never seen. Here she is surrounded by musicians, young men with beards, girls with colored strands in their hair, all smiling at the camera, hugging each other. Here's a festival poster with her name on the list of performers. Blaze, Zionsville, 23 hours. I walked slowly around the room, scrutinizing every photo, every poster. One of them showed Beatrice standing next to a famous folk singer. I didn't know his name, but his face seemed familiar from television programs. They were holding guitars and smiling broadly. On the coffee table was an open notebook with the outline of a song. Beatrice's handwriting was neat, with a slight slant to the right, and I would have recognized it from 1,000. And the walls became transparent when I finally saw the sky, reads one line. Next to it were notes, corrections, musical notation only she could understand. In the corner of the room, I noticed a rack of neatly arranged boxes. When I got closer, I saw that they were albums, vinyl records in envelopes with a minimalist design. On each is the title and artist's name, Blaze. Quiet Rooms is the first album. The cover features a half-open door, behind which you can see an empty room with a lone chair. Behind closed doors, this one has a picture of a window with the curtains pulled back, with light shining through. And the last one, Bird in a Cage, is a silhouette of a woman standing at a window. Behind her back is a cage with a door open, but no bird inside. I took the album, carefully pulled the record out of the envelope. On the back was a list of songs: Motherly Expectations, When They Don't Listen, Invisible, Second Self, Behind the Mask, Unsolicited Advice, A Life I Didn't Choose, Freedom is Silence, Cedar Lullaby, The Bird Has Flown Away. My heart clenched at the titles alone. I couldn't help but wonder how many of these songs were about me, about our relationship. Next to the albums were boxes of CDs, the same albums, but in a different format, apparently for sale at concerts. And behind them was a folder labeled Letters. I opened it and found dozens of fan letters, some printed, others handwritten. I pulled one out at random. Dear Blaze, your song Invisible changed my life. I listened to it over and over again after a fight with my mother, and each time I found comfort in it. How do you manage to put so much sincerity into your lyrics? Every line sounds like you are singing to me personally, about my life. I hope you continue to write and perform. Your voice is needed by people like me. With gratitude, Emma K. I set the letter aside, feeling tears come to my throat. Beatrice didn't just write songs. She touched people's hearts. She had real fans who had been helped through difficult times by her music. and I didn't know anything about it. Walking down the hallway, I found two bedrooms. One was clearly a guest room, a neatly made bed, an empty dresser, no personal belongings. The other was his and Noah's. Family photos on the walls, books on the bedside tables, clothes in the closet. Among the photos, I found one where Beatrice and Noah stood embraced on the shore of this very lake. They looked so happy, so in love. Beatrice was wearing a simple summer dress, her hair fluttering in the wind. Noah looked at her with adoration. I'd never seen them like that before. They were always more reserved in my presence. Back in the studio living room, I saw a door I hadn't noticed before. It led to a veranda overlooking the lake. I stepped out and stopped, struck by the beauty of the landscape. The setting sun was coloring the water a golden pink, the tall cedars reflected in the still surface. The silence was broken only by the soft splashing of the waves near the shore and the rare cries of birds. No wonder Beatrice loved this place. It was peaceful and beautiful, a perfect retreat for the creative soul. There were two wicker chairs and a small table on the veranda. I imagined Beatrice sitting here with her guitar, looking at the water and composing her songs, or how she and Noah drank coffee in the morning, discussing new melodies and lyrics. This picture triggered a new wave of pain and regret. My daughter was talented, successful in her field, happy, and I was not a part of that happiness. Through no fault of hers, through my own. Back in the house, I noticed another door, this time in the corner of the living room, next to the recording equipment. It was tightly closed. I turned the knob and entered a small room that apparently served as a soundproof booth for recording vocals. The walls were padded with special material, a microphone on a stand in the center, a chair and a sheet music stand next to it. There was a beautiful oriental carpet on the floor, which gave the room a cozy look. But what caught my attention was a small table against the wall. On it stood an old cassette recorder, just like the one Beatrice had had as a child, and next to it lay a cassette tape that read, "For Mom, when you're ready to hear." I took the tape with trembling hands. Beatrice had recorded something for me? When? And why had she never given the tape away? I inserted the cassette into the tape recorder, pressed the play button, and held my breath. First, there was silence, then a rustle, and finally, my daughter's voice, so familiar and yet strangely new. "Hi, Mom. If you're listening to this, it means you're finally at our cottage. I hope you like it here. It's a special place for Noah and me. I can be myself here. I should have told you before about the music, about the concerts, about the songs. But every time I got ready, I remembered how you felt about my poems at school, how you said art was a hobby, nothing more, that it didn't feed me. You never believed my words could mean anything. And over time, it became easier to just not show you that part of my life. But I'm tired of secrets, Mom. Tired of dividing my life between the one I show you and the real one. Noah says I should just invite you here, show you the studio, turn on the tapes. But I'm afraid of your reaction. Afraid you'll say it's not serious, that I'm wasting my time. So I'm recording this message as a kind of bridge between us. Step 1. In the closet in the studio, you'll find all my albums and demos. Listen to them, please. This is me, the real me, the one you probably never knew. And when you're ready, give me a call. Maybe we can finally have a real conversation." The recording ended, and the tape automatically stopped. I sat frozen, tears streaming down my cheeks. Beatrice wanted to open up to me, had planned for it, but she didn't have time. Death had caught her halfway between secrecy and candor. And now I'll never be able to tell her that I'm proud of her, that her music mattered, that it mattered, always, even when I couldn't show it properly. I found a box of demo tapes in the closet, dozens of tapes and discs, neatly signed and dated. The earliest recording was from 20 years ago, before she'd even met Noah. so she'd started writing songs in college, away from my critical eye. Back in the main room, I saw a picture on the wall that I hadn't noticed before. Beatrice on stage, singing with her eyes closed, one hand raised in an emotional gesture, and the caption under the photo is a quote, "Music is freedom. It's the only place where I can be completely myself, without looking back at other people's expectations." I sank down on the couch, stunned by all I had seen and heard. My daughter, my Beatrice, had lived a whole life I had no idea about. She created a whole world I had no access to, and she died, taking with her most of her songs, her thoughts, her soul. But she left something behind: this cottage, the studio, the recordings, and a chance for me to recognize her, even if it was too late. I turned on the desk lamp, pulled the notebook with her notes to me, and began to read, trying to reconstruct the image of the daughter I had never really known. I decided to stay at the cottage for a few days. I called Ethel and asked her to watch the house and water the flowers. She, of course, peppered me with questions, but I got off with vague answers. I couldn't bring myself to tell her that I had discovered a secret life I didn't even know I had. The first night at the cottage, I hardly slept at all. I lay in the guest bedroom, listening to the quiet splash of the lake outside the window and unfamiliar forest sounds. My thoughts swirled around Beatrice, her music, her double life. How could she hide such an important part of herself for so many years? And how could I not notice? In the morning, I showered, brewed some tea I found in the kitchen cupboard, and began a methodical study of my daughter's legacy. I wanted to know the real her, the one I'd never seen. I started with albums. On a shelf in the studio, I found a vinyl record player, old but in excellent condition. I carefully put on Beatrice's first album, Quiet Rooms. As the first chords of the guitar sounded and then my daughter's voice filled the room, I froze, shocked. I had never heard Beatrice sing, except as a child in the school choir. But this voice belonged to a mature woman, deep, slightly husky, incredibly expressive. The first song was called Paper Walls. Beatrice sang about a house where all walls are like paper, where there is no room for secrets, where every breath is heard. Behind a paper wall, I hide all my dreams so they can't be torn to shreds by your caring hands. She sang, and I felt myself blush with shame. It was a song about me, about our home, about my control. I listened to the entire album, pausing between songs to jot down lines that particularly struck a nerve. Many were about freedom, about wanting to break free, about fear of judgment. Some were about the love and understanding she'd found with Noah. One, especially poignant, was about how she divided her life into two parts: the visible and the real. The second album, Behind Closed Doors, was even more personal. There was more anger, more pain in these songs. I was especially shaken by the song Phone Conversations, about how she prepares answers to my questions, how she picks the right words to hide the truth, how she feels devastated after each conversation. I say what you want to hear, Mom. I've become a master of this game. But with each call, a part of me disappears, dissolving into expectations I can never live up to. By lunchtime, I was feeling emotionally drained. I sat on the veranda with a cup of tea, looking out at the calm surface of the lake. How blind had I been all these years? How had I not noticed my daughter's pain, her creative nature, her need for self-expression? That evening, I found albums of photographs on the bookshelf in Beatrice and Noah's bedroom. The first was of their travels, shots from Portland, Seattle, San Francisco, national parks. Beatrice with a guitar by the fire, Noah tuning some instrument against a mountain backdrop, the two of them under a huge sequoia tree, holding hands and smiling. The second album captured their musical life: gigs in small clubs, meetings with other musicians, rehearsals. In many of the photos was Willa Kincaid, always with an unchanging cigarette in her hand and a sly smile. Now I understood why Beatrice had become so close to her, not just a colleague teacher, but a like-minded co-conspirator in a secret life. The third album was the most painful. It was called simply Family. There were baby pictures of Beatrice, a few with Henry, my late husband, and a lot of blank pages. It was as if Beatrice had left room for family moments that never happened. The next day, I moved on to examine the diaries I found in a desk drawer in the studio. There were several of them, each labeled with a year. I started with the earliest, dated from when Beatrice first met Noah. Performed at the Black Cat tonight. Small cafe, only 20 people in the audience, but they really worked. After the gig, a musician, Noah Abbott, came up to me. He said that my lyrics moved him, that I had a special voice. We talked until the morning. He understands. Really understands what it means to write songs, to put your soul into them. I've never met someone like that before. I flipped through the pages, immersed in a world I didn't realize was out there. Beatrice wrote about her growing love for Noah, about their first performances together, about her fear of showing this part of her life to me. My mom called today, asked about work, about plans. I talked about teaching, school projects. Nothing about music, about concerts, about the songs I write at night. She wouldn't understand. I remember showing her my first poem as a child, and she just shook her head and said it was a waste of time. Since then, I've learned to keep my words to myself, or to share them only with those who are really listening. Reading those lines, I felt a lump come up to my throat. I remembered the incident differently. I thought I was just being practical, wanting to protect my daughter from disappointment, to channel her energy in a more hopeful direction. But it became a trauma for her, a moment of rejection that defined our relationship for years to come. A diary from the year they bought the dacha contained enthusiastic descriptions of the place. Noah and I found the perfect house on Cedar Lake. Quiet, private, great acoustics in the main room. We're going to set up a studio. Noah has already bought a mixing console. This is where I'll finally be able to record all the songs that live in my head. Here I can be myself, without masks and pretenses. Mom, of course, must never find out about this place. She wouldn't understand why we'd go to the extra expense of a second home, and she certainly wouldn't approve of the studio. Music doesn't feed Beatrice, she'd say. If she only knew how many people come to our concerts, how many CDs we sold last month. I set the diary aside, feeling tears streaming down my cheeks. My daughter was afraid to show me her progress because she thought I wouldn't approve. And she was right. Wouldn't I have been skeptical of her music career? Wouldn't I have said it wasn't serious, unreliable, that it needed a real job? In a diary from the last year of Beatrice's life, I found entries that broke my heart completely. Yesterday, we performed at the Portland Festival. Biggest audience I've ever had, about 500 people. They were singing along to my songs. Noah says I finally broke through. After the concert, people came up to me with tears in their eyes, thanking me for my music, for my lyrics that helped them through a difficult time. I thought about my mom all evening. How I wish she could have seen me there on stage, to hear my songs, to see how they touch people. Maybe then she'd realize it wasn't a waste of time, that my words matter. Noah says I should just invite her to a concert or to the cottage, show her this part of my life, but I'm afraid of her judgment, her disappointed look, her practical comments that will devalue everything that matters to me. And yet, I'm 37 years old. Isn't it time to stop fearing my own mother's disapproval? Isn't it time to finally be myself, completely, without compromise or secrets? It's decided. After the summer tour, I'll tell her. I'll bring her to the cottage, play the tapes, show her the studio. I'll see what happens. After all, it's my life. The last entry was dated 3 days before Beatrice's death. Called my mom today, was going to invite her to the cottage next weekend. But the conversation turned back to the usual course. Her advice about how I should teach lessons, what I should demand from students, how I should communicate with the school administration. I listened and thought, she knows nothing about the real me. About my concerts, my songs, my fans. About the contract an independent label offered us. About the review of my latest album in a music magazine. And maybe that's better. Maybe these two worlds should exist separately from each other? My mom with her expectations and practicality in one, me with my music and creativity in the other. But no, I'm tired of the double life. I'll pick her up next Friday and bring her here. Whatever happens. But next Friday didn't happen. On Tuesday, Beatrice died of an aneurysm, suddenly, without warning, taking with her songs she hadn't yet had time to write, words she hadn't had time to say to me, reconciliation that hadn't had time to happen. On the evening of the third day of my stay at the cottage, I decided to listen to Beatrice's latest album, Caged Bird. By this time, I had grown accustomed to her voice, to her manner of performance, to the poignant honesty of her lyrics. But nothing prepared me for the album's title song. Caged Bird was the story of a woman who spent her life conforming to other people's expectations, who built a cage for herself out of duty, propriety, and other people's ideas of the right life, and who finally found the strength to open the door and fly out, towards the unknown, freedom and her own authentic self. You were afraid for me, Mom. You wanted to keep me from falling. But you only taught me to be afraid to fly. You didn't know that wings are not for folding. I grew up in a cage of your worries and inhibitions. But today, I open the door. Today, I fly. When the song ended, I sat motionless, shaken to the core. This song was a cry of liberation, a manifesto of independence. And it was addressed to me. Beatrice had freed herself from my expectations, from my control, from having to be who I wanted her to be, created her own life, her own art, her own social circle. And though she was physically back in Zionsville, though we still saw each other and talked, a part of her, the most important, the most real part, lived here at this cottage, in the music, in the songs, away from my judgmental eyes. On the fourth day, I felt an overwhelming desire to do something with this new information, to react somehow to the truth about my daughter. I called several music stores in Portland, trying to find out if they had Blaze albums. Two places said yes, her records were available, albeit in small quantities. Then I called the radio station, which, judging by the posters on the walls of the cottage, sometimes played her songs. Blaze? Of course I do, the young presenter replied. She has an amazing voice and great lyrics. It's a shame she left music so suddenly. Gone? I asked. Well, yes, she canceled all the concerts for the next few months, and the new album is on hold. Her producer, Ghost, said the project was closed. Did something happen? I couldn't come up with an answer. Noah apparently didn't inform the public of Beatrice's death. To them, she just disappeared from the stage. Yes, something personal. I finally squeezed out. Tell me, was her music popular? In certain circles, very popular. Indie folk wasn't mainstream, but Blaze had a loyal audience. Her last album got great reviews from critics. I thanked the presenter and hung up, feeling strangely proud of my daughter. She had achieved recognition in the music world, without my help, without my encouragement, in spite of my skepticism. That evening, I was sitting on the veranda, watching the sunset over the lake, when I heard the sound of a car pulling up. A few minutes later, Noah appeared on the path leading from the parking lot to the house. He froze when he saw me, then slowly walked up to the porch. Miriam, he said without surprise. Willa said you were here. I nodded. not knowing how to start the conversation. What to say to the man I'd always thought was a bad match for my daughter, but who turned out to be her closest ally, a supporter of her art. I've listened to her music, I finally said. I read her diaries. Noah sat in a nearby chair, looking out over the lake. What did you think? That I didn't know my daughter at all, I answered honestly, and that you knew her better than I did. He paused, fiddling with his silver earring, the same gesture that used to annoy me so much. Bee was special, he said at last. Such talent, such a soul. But she was always afraid to show it to you. Why didn't you insist? Didn't bring her here? Didn't make her tell you? Noah looked at me in surprise. It was her choice, Miriam. I couldn't force her, and she wasn't prepared for your reaction. How do you know what my reaction would have been? I flared up. Maybe I would have been proud of her. You would? He raised an eyebrow. Would you be proud that your daughter sings in bars and clubs? That she writes songs about her feelings and traumas? That she chose the uncertainty of the music industry over a stable career as a lawyer? I wanted to object, but I couldn't. He was right. I wouldn't understand, wouldn't approve, wouldn't support it. I've changed, I said quietly. After she died, I'd rethought a lot of things. It's a shame it took her death, Noah said bitterly. She wanted your approval so much, Miriam, all her life, even when she pretended not to care. We sat in silence, watching the last rays of the sun disappear behind the trees. Then Noah stood up. I've come to pick up some things, if you don't mind. Sure, I nodded. This is your home as much as it is mine. Not anymore. He shook his head. Bee left it to you. I think she wanted you to finally see this part of her life. He left for the house, and I stayed on the veranda, thinking about his words. Had Beatrice really left me the cottage as a last attempt to reach out to me? As a way to show me her true self, even if it took her death to do so? Noah returned half an hour later with a small box and a guitar in a case. This is her first guitar, he said. She wrote most of her early songs on it. I want to keep it. I nodded, unable to object. And the studio, the equipment, the recordings, you don't want to take that away? No, he shook his head. Without Bee, none of this made sense. We were a team, you know? She was the voice, I was the sound. Together we were creating something special. Now, he shrugged. Now I don't know what to do with all this. Neither do I admitted. Noah looked at me carefully. You know, Miriam, Bee always said that you were the most determined person she knew. That if you make up your mind about something, you'll do it. Maybe now is the time for decisions. With those words, he walked away, leaving me alone with thoughts of my daughter, her music, and what I could do to right my wrongs, albeit too late. After Noah left, I spent a sleepless night. Lying in the guest bedroom, listening to the wind rustle the leaves outside the window, I thought about my daughter, her music, her secret life, about what might have been if I had been a different mother, more understanding, less critical, able to see and support her talents rather than trying to squeeze her into my ideas of the right life. I called Noah in the morning. I didn't know what I wanted out of the conversation, but I felt the need to learn more about Beatrice's music career, a part of her life that had remained a mystery to me until her final days. Miriam? His voice sounded surprised. Did something happen? No, I hesitated, searching for words. I wanted to talk to you about Beatrice, her music, how it all started, if you don't mind. Long pause. I could almost see him frowning, thinking. Okay, he finally said. I can come over tonight. I have something you should see. I spent the whole day in a strange state of tense anticipation, going through Beatrice's records, rereading her diaries, looking at photographs, I tried to imagine what she was like on stage, my quiet, always reserved daughter, who, it turned out, knew how to rock an audience with her songs. Noah arrived around 7 in the evening. He was carrying a bag with a laptop and several folders. "Come on in." I stepped aside to let him into the house. "Do you want some tea?" "No, thank you." He walked into the living room and sat down on the couch where Beatrice and I usually sat during my rare visits to their townhouse. "I brought the videotapes. Thought it might be important for you to see B on stage." He opened his laptop and started plugging it into the TV on the wall. "When did she start writing songs?" I asked, sitting down in the chair across from him. Noah hesitated, fiddling with the wires. In a way, she'd always done it. When I met her, she already had a notebook of poems that she sometimes sang to the simplest chords. But seriously, I think after we got married, when she felt she had a safe space to create. "Safe?" I asked, feeling a pang of guilt. "Yes." He looked at me without judgment, simply stating the fact. B had always been afraid of judgment, of criticism, especially from you. It took me a long time to convince her that her words, her voice, had value, that her emotions and thoughts deserved to be expressed. I remained silent, digesting his words. The video on the screen began a small club, semi-darkness, a beam of light picking out a figure on the stage. Beatrice, my daughter, in a simple black dress, holding a guitar. She takes a deep breath and begins to sing. The song was about childhood, about a little girl dreaming, drawing with her wings in the dust. But the adults don't see it. Stepping on her drawings, talking about important things, about the future, about making the right decisions. They don't see the wings in the dust. They don't hear the songs and the rustle of the leaves. They make plans and build walls, and I just want to fly. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. Beatrice on stage was nothing like the quiet, reserved woman I knew. She was free, passionate, expressive. Her voice rose to shrill heights and then dropped to an intimate whisper. She moved to the beat of the music, sometimes closing her eyes, completely immersed in the song. "It was her first solo concert," Noah said, looking at the screen fondly. "A small club in Portland, only 30 people in the audience. She was so nervous before she came out, she threw up. And then she came out, and she was just, transformed." The video changed to another, a larger venue, more lights, professional filming. Beatrice is on stage with a group of musicians. Her hair is gathered in a casual bun. She is wearing jeans and a loose blouse. She smiles at the audience, says something. The sound is not good enough to make out the words, but you can tell from the audience's reaction that it was something funny. Then she nods to the musicians, and the song begins, more energetic, with a pronounced rhythm. "It's a festival in Seattle 2 years ago," Noah explained. "The first time she performed in front of a really big audience, about 300 people. After the concert, she had a line of people lined up to get her autograph and tell her how much her songs meant to them. I watched my daughter glow on stage, how confident she was, how she interacted with the audience and the musicians. A completely different Beatrice, not the same Beatrice who came to my house for Sunday lunches, discreetly telling me about her school days. Why didn't she tell me? The question came out of my mouth. Was I really that terrible of a mother? Noah turned off the video and turned to me. "It's not that you were terrible, Miriam. It's just that you had very different ideas about what was important in life. You valued stability, practicality, social acceptance. B valued freedom, self-expression, the ability to touch people's hearts with her music. But I could understand," I objected, "if she'd given me a chance. Could you?" Noah looked at me questioningly. "B had tried to share her creative impulses with you as a child and a teenager, and each time she'd been met with incomprehension or criticism. That won't get you anywhere good, Beatrice. Do something serious, my daughter. Art is a hobby, nothing more. He mimicked my intonation exactly, and I shuddered, recognizing my own words. I just wanted what was best for her, I whispered. I know, Noah nodded, and she knew it too. But you never asked her what the best meant to her, what kind of life she wants for herself, what values are important to her. He opened one of the folders he'd brought with him. Inside were newspaper and magazine clippings, reviews of Beatrice's albums, small interviews, concert announcements. Here, look at this. He handed me an article from a music magazine. Blaze, the voice of a generation that's tired of being silenced, the headline read. I started reading. In a world where commercial music often offers only superficial emotions and repetitive rhythms, Blaze's voice sounds like a revelation. Her third album, Caged Bird, is not just a collection of songs, but a cohesive work of art that explores themes of freedom, authenticity, and the courage to be yourself. The title track in particular stands out, in which Blaze speaks with poignant honesty about how difficult it is to break free from the cage of other people's expectations. I grew up in a cage of your anxieties and inhibitions, but today I'm opening the door. Today I'm flying, she sings, and it's impossible not to feel the release in her voice. She had fans, Noah continued as I read. Not millions, of course, but thousands of people for whom her songs meant something. People wrote to her, thanking her for giving them the courage to be themselves, to resist pressure, to find their own way. He showed me another article, an interview with Beatrice after the release of her second album. Your songs are very personal, almost confessional. Isn't it scary to bare your soul to your listeners like that? Scared, of course, laughs Blaze. But I've been hiding my real feelings all my life, adjusting to other people's expectations, and I realized it was slowly killing me. Music became my salvation, a way to finally say what I really thought and felt. And it turns out a lot of people are feeling the same way. So now my songs are not only my therapy, but also an opportunity to help others find their voice. I set the article aside, feeling tears come to my throat. She was talented, Noah said quietly. Truly talented, and happy when she wrote and sang. I'd never seen her as alive as she was on stage. He turned on another video, not a concert this time, but something homemade, filmed here at the cottage. Beatrice sits on the veranda with her guitar, the sun illuminating her hair, creating almost a halo around her head. She hums something soft and gentle, looking out over the lake. Then she turns to the camera, to Noah, and smiles that open, happy smile I haven't seen on her since she was a child. It was 2 months ago, Noah said. We came down for the weekend, and she was in such a good mood. She wrote a new song right there on the veranda, said it was going to be the first track for a new album. She was planning a new album? I asked. Yes, he nodded. We had a contract with an independent label, small but reputable. They wanted to do a full tour in support of the new album 10 Cities on the West Coast. Bea was so excited, said she was finally ready to take it to the next level. He fell silent, and I could see him fighting back tears, remembering plans that weren't meant to be. And she also said she was going to tell you after the tour, he added more quietly, that she couldn't live a double life anymore, that she wanted her mom to know what she was really proud of. Those words hurt more than anything else. Beatrice was going to open up to me, show me her real life, her art, her accomplishments. But she didn't have time. What was her dream, I asked, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. What were her plans for the future? Noah smiled, remembering. A lot of things. She wanted to record an album with an orchestra, a real symphony orchestra. Dreamed of performing at a big festival in California where all the important indie musicians gather. I planned to write a song cycle about women in history who fought for their voice and freedom. He opened a folder of photos on his laptop, started showing me pictures that weren't in the albums at the cottage. Beatrice in the recording studio, leaning over the mixing desk. Beatrice practicing with a group of musicians. Beatrice signing autographs after a concert, smiling at the young men and women who looked at her with adoration. That was her life, Miriam, a real life, not the role of model teacher and daughter she played for you. I looked at the pictures, and each one was like a stab to the heart. How many things I had missed. How many of my daughter's joys and triumphs have passed me by because I failed to accept her for who she is, because I created an atmosphere where she was afraid to show me her true self. Why didn't you insist that she tell me sooner? I asked Noah bitterly. You've seen how important this work is to her, how it makes her happy. Noah stared at me for a long moment, as if weighing whether to tell me the truth. I tried, he said finally. Many times. But B, she was afraid of your disapproval. She said you always wanted her to be a successful lawyer or doctor, not a tramp singer, as she put it. He paused, then added more quietly. You know what she said when her first album came out, and we got the first positive reviews? Mom will think it's a waste of time anyway. She'll say I could have done better, and no matter how much I convinced her that you'd be proud, she didn't believe it. I closed my eyes, feeling the tears flow down my cheeks. Had I poisoned her self-confidence so much that she viewed even obvious success through the lens of my possible disapproval? She'd been talking a lot about reconciliation for the last year, Noah continued, that she was tired of secrets, of living a double life, that she wanted to be whole. She even wrote down a message for you, which I think you've already found. Yeah, I nodded, on a cassette tape. For Mom, when you're ready to hear it. She recorded it a month before she died. She was going to invite you here after the summer tour. She said, it's time for Mom to know who I really am. Whatever she thinks. We were silent for a long time. I stared at the TV screen, where there was a still image of Beatrice, with her guitar, with her smile, with that special light in her eyes that I'd never seen when she was with me. I miss her, Noah finally said. Every day, every goddamn day. I wake up and for a second I forget she's gone. And then reality comes crashing down, and I don't know how to go on. How to go on without her voice, her laugh, her songs. I saw him clench his fists, trying to contain his emotions, and for the first time in years, I felt not annoyance, but sympathy for this man. He loved my daughter, really loved not the version I wanted to see, but the real Beatrice, with all her fears and dreams and talents. Had she told you why we never got back together? I asked quietly. Noah shrugged, said you had different outlooks on life, that you never approved of her choices, not her school, not her profession, not me, that you always thought she could have done better if she'd tried harder. I really thought that, I admitted. Beatrice was a smart girl. She could have gone to a prestigious university, pursued a career in law or medicine, but she chose a teacher's college, became a school teacher, and a well-known folk singer in certain circles, Noah added, with a slight smile. Don't forget that part. Yeah, I sighed. I knew now that she'd lived a much fuller and more colorful life than I'd realized. She just kept it from me. She was afraid you wouldn't realize how important it was to her, that you'd dismiss it, say it wasn't serious, or, even worse, that you'd start controlling that part of her life too, giving her advice on how to build her music career, who to collaborate with, what songs to write. I recognized myself in those words, and it hurt. Yeah, that's probably what I would have done. I would have interfered, advised, controlled, with the best of intentions, of course, wanting to help, to guide, to keep her from making mistakes, not realizing that by doing so, I would have stifled her creativity, her joy, her freedom. I was a terrible mother, I said quietly. Noah shook his head. No, Miriam. You were a mother who wanted the best for her daughter. It was just that your idea of best didn't match what was best for B. You spoke different languages, wanted different things out of life. That doesn't make you terrible. It makes you different people. He gathered his things, turned off his laptop. It's late, I'm going to go. But if you want, I can come back tomorrow. I have more recordings, rehearsals, concerts, interviews. You have to see it all to understand who your daughter was, who she has become, despite all her fears and doubts. Thank you, I nodded. I would like to see everything. After I saw Noah off, I sat on the veranda for a long time, staring at the moon's path on the water. Thoughts swarmed in my head, intertwined, creating a painful pattern of realization and regret. My daughter was afraid of me, not physically, of course, but emotionally. Afraid of my judgment, my disapproval, my control. So much so that she chose to hide the most important part of her life from me: her music, her art, her talent, her true self. And I, blinded by my own ideas of right living, didn't see it. Didn't ask questions, didn't try to really get to know her. I took superficial conversations at face value, unaware of the depths that lurked beneath that smooth surface. Now that Beatrice is gone, I finally saw her. The real her, the talented her, the brave her, seen through her music, through Noah's stories, through videos and photos. But never again will I be able to tell her that I'm proud of her, that her songs touched me to the core, that she was right to choose her path over the one I tried to force on her. The thought was unbearable. I got up and went back into the house. I went to the shelf with Beatrice's records, ran my fingers over the covers. Quiet rooms, behind closed doors, caged bird. The story of her liberation, from my expectations, from my control, from having to be who I wanted her to be. I pulled out the latest album, put it on the turntable. My daughter's voice filled the room, strong, confident, free. She sang of flight, of wings open, of a sky without borders. And I cried as I listened, realizing that this flight was not only her liberation, but also my defeat as a mother. A defeat I deserved by my lack of understanding, my control, my inability to see and accept the real her. The song ended, but I continued to sit in silence, staring at the spinning disc. Mentally, I was telling Beatrice all the things I never said in my lifetime: that she was amazing, that her music mattered, that I was proud of her, not for who I wanted her to be, but for who she became in spite of me. But it was too late. Those words would never reach her again. They would remain in the emptiness of this house, among her records and sheet music and photographs, monuments to a talent I had failed to recognize while she was alive. A week later, I returned to Zionsville with a firm decision. The Cedar Lake Cottage would not be sold. The place had become a bridge for me to the daughter I had never truly known, and I couldn't just get rid of it. The first thing I did was go to the real estate agent to withdraw my pre-sale request. "Are you sure, Mrs. Price?" Dash asked the realtor, a young man with a neatly trimmed beard. "It's a great time to sell lakefront property. We could make a good sum." "I'm absolutely sure," I replied. "This house has a special value to me." I left the agency and went to the school where Beatrice taught. I needed to talk to Willa. I had an idea and I needed her help. Willa listened to me attentively, without interrupting, only occasionally taking a drag from her cigarette. We were sitting in the empty music room after school, and I was talking about my plan to organize a memorial for Beatrice, not for the school history teacher, but for Blaze, the talented folk singer. "Do you think that's a good idea?" I asked after I'd finished my explanation. Have a concert at the cottage, invite people who knew her as a musician, play recordings of her songs? Willa tapped her finger on the table thoughtfully. It's not a bad idea, Miriam. But do you realize that there will be people coming who loved Beatrice very differently from you? People in front of whom she made no secret of her true feelings? People who know about your complicated history from her songs? I nodded. The thought had visited me, but I was ready to face the consequences of my mistakes. I understand, and yet I want to do this. For Beatrice, and for myself. Willa looked at me carefully, then nodded slowly. Good. I'll help you get in touch with the music community. Blaze had a loyal following, not celebrities, of course, but people to whom her songs meant a lot. And Noah? I asked. Do you think he'd be willing to participate? Willa shrugged. I don't know. He's taking her death very hard. But it's worth asking. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing the memorial. With Willa's help, I contacted the musicians who had played with Beatrice. I sent out invitations to fans of her work. The contacts were found in a folder of letters at the cottage. I called the radio station that sometimes played her songs, and the DJ agreed to announce the upcoming event. Noah answered my call discreetly, but he didn't refuse right away. I'll think about it, he said. It's not a bad idea, but, it's gonna be hard, Miriam, to go back there, to hear her voice, to see the people who loved her music. I understand, I replied, but I think Beatrice would have wanted her songs to keep her songs going. That people would remember the real her. He was quiet for a moment. Dash. Perhaps you're right. I'll contact you a couple of days before the event. I took care of the practical matters. I ordered light snacks and drinks, bought extra chairs for the guests, checked the sound equipment in the studio. At my request, Noah compiled a list of Beatrice's songs to play, the most meaningful, the most personal, the ones that best reflected her soul. Finally, the day of the memorial evening arrived. I arrived at the cottage early in the morning to get everything ready. I arranged the chairs on the veranda and in the living room, hung up the extra photos of Beatrice I'd found in my albums and the ones Noah had given me. On a table in the corner of the room, I put her albums and a few copies of a homemade booklet I'd made with lyrics and a short biography. People started arriving around 4 in the afternoon. Willa and a few teachers from Beatrice's school were the first to show up, the few people who knew about her musical career. Then the musicians she had performed with, bearded young men with guitars and girls with unconventional hairstyles, pulled up. I greeted each one at the door, shaking hands, thanking them for coming. To my surprise, a few of Beatrice's students, who had already graduated from high school but had fond memories of their history teacher, also came. Cassie from the grocery store was among them. I didn't know Miss Abbott was a singer, she said, wide-eyed, looking around the studio. She never talked about it. She didn't say much, I replied with a sad smile. By 5 o'clock, about 30 people had gathered. They were talking softly, looking at the pictures on the walls, flipping through albums. I noticed that many of them greeted each other like old acquaintances, apparently regulars at Beatrice's concerts. Noah was still gone, and I began to worry if he was coming at all. But at exactly 5:30, when I was about to start without him, his tall figure appeared on the threshold. He nodded at me, but kept to himself, not trying to approach. I stepped to the center of the room and coughed, drawing attention. The conversation slowly died down, and all eyes turned to me. Thank you all for coming today, I began, trying to keep my voice steady. For those who don't know me, I'm Miriam Price, Beatrice's mother, and I've invited you here today to remember my daughter, not only as a history teacher, but also as a talented musician, known to many of you as Blaze. I paused, gathering my thoughts. I must confess that I hadn't known about this side of Beatrice's life until recently. She never told me about her music, her concerts, the songs she wrote. It was only after her death, when I came to this cottage, that I discovered the studio, the recordings, the photographs, and I realized how much I had missed. A quiet whisper ran through the room. I could see people exchanging glances, a look of surprise on their faces, and some of them a slight condemnation. Tonight I want to correct that mistake, I continued. I want Beatrice's music to be heard, to be remembered as she really was, talented, passionate, sincere, and I invite you all to share your memories of her performances, of what her songs meant to you. I grabbed the remote from the table and turned on the first record, Paper Walls, from her first album. Beatrice's voice filled the room, and I saw some of the guests cover their eyes as they immersed themselves in the music, some silently singing along to the familiar words. After the song, one of the musicians came up, a tall guy with long hair gathered in a ponytail. I've been playing bass with B for almost 3 years, he said, and I'd never met someone who had such a keen sense of music, such a knack for conveying emotion through simple words. She was real, real in every note, in every movement on stage. He was followed by a young woman who introduced herself as the organizer of the festival where Beatrice had performed last summer. When I first heard Blaze, I couldn't believe she wasn't more famous, she said. Such talent, such depth. Her songs touched a nerve, made you think, make you feel. We were planning to have her headline the next festival. The woman's voice trembled, and she couldn't finish her sentence. One by one, people stood up, sharing memories, stories of how Beatrice's music had influenced their lives. Some told of concerts, some of chance encounters, some of just crying while listening to her songs during difficult times. I turned on the tapes between performances, and my daughter's voice filled the space, strong, expressive, at times angry, at times tender, but always piercingly honest. Noah was silent until the very end. He stood against the wall, arms crossed over his chest, with an impenetrable expression on his face. But when Caged Bird, the last song on our program, came on, I saw him turn away, hiding his tears. When the music subsided, I stepped back out into the center of the room. "There's something else I want to say," I said, looking around. I had not been a good mother to Beatrice. I didn't understand her, didn't support her creativity, didn't see how important music was to her. I was too busy with my own ideas of the right life to notice that she had her own way, and she chose to hide the most important part of her life from me than to share and risk misunderstanding or judgment. I took a breath, feeling tears coming to my throat. Now, listening to you, seeing how many lives she has touched with her songs, I am proud of her talent, her courage, her determination to go her own way against all odds. And though I will never be able to tell her this, though I will never be able to correct my mistakes, I want you to know that this dacha will remain a monument to her creativity. I will not sell it. And if any of you who loved her music ever want to come here, to remember Beatrice, to listen to her songs, the doors will be open. There was silence after my speech. I saw different emotions on the faces of those present: sympathy, sadness, but also awkwardness, even a certain coldness. Many of these people knew from Beatrice's songs how difficult our relationship had been, how she had suffered from my misunderstanding. My belated remorse could not change that. Gradually, people began to disperse. Many came up, thanking me for the evening, for the opportunity to hear Beatrice's voice again, to share memories, but I felt the distance in their words, the formality in their handshakes. I remained a stranger to them, someone who didn't understand or accept their blaze in their lifetime. Cassie, Beatrice's student, lingered longer than the others. "You know," she said, rubbing the bracelet on her arm, "Ms. Abbott helped me many times when I had problems at home. My parents didn't understand me either. didn't support my hobbies. And she said it was okay to be different, to go your own way, that you have to learn to live with your truth, even if your loved ones can't accept it. I nodded silently, feeling each word weigh on my heart. I didn't know she lived by that principle, Cassie continued, that her music was her way of telling the truth. But now that I've listened to her songs, I realize where she gets her wisdom for her advice. When everyone left, it was just Noah and Willa. They sat on the veranda talking softly, sometimes silent, looking out at the lake. I joined them, holding a cup of cooled tea. "Thank you for coming," I said. "It meant a lot to me." Willa nodded, but Noah continued to stare at the water. "Are you really not going to sell the cottage?" Willa asked. "I really am. It's where she belonged. It's where she was happy. It's where she was herself. I can't just get rid of it like it never happened." "And what do you plan to do next?" Willa asked. I wondered. It was a question that had been on my mind for the last few days. "I'm not sure. Maybe I'll collect her unreleased songs, make a memorial album, or organize a scholarship in her name for musically gifted children at our school." "Noble intentions," Noah said, speaking directly to me for the first time all evening. "But don't you think that's a little belated?" There was no direct condemnation in his voice, only weariness and deep sadness. "Of course it's late," I said, trying not to show how much it hurt me. "I know that nothing will bring Beatrice back, won't make up for my mistakes, won't give me a chance to say how proud I am of her. But what can I do? Just forget. Sell the cottage, take the inheritance, and move on with my life as if nothing had happened?" "No," Noah shook his head. "But don't expect forgiveness or approval from the people who saw how hard it was for Bee because of your misunderstanding, who have held her hand when she cried after another conversation with you, who know her songs by heart and understand what and who she was singing about." I remained silent, taking the punch. He was right. I couldn't expect people who knew the true history of our relationship with Beatrice to suddenly accept me, to forgive me, to let me be part of their circle, the circle of people who truly understood and valued my daughter. "I'm not looking for forgiveness," I said at last. I want to keep her memory alive, the real her, not for others, for myself." Noah stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "That's your right," he said, standing up. "I have to go. Thank you for tonight, Miriam." Bee would have been touched that so many people had gathered to remember her. He left without looking back. Willa stayed a little longer, helping to put away the chairs and gather the dishes. We talked about school, about plans for the future, but we didn't touch the painful topics of Beatrice and our relationship with her. Finally, she left, leaving me alone in a house full of ghosts of the past. I went around the rooms, turning out the lights, collecting the remaining glasses and plates. I went into the studio, the place where Beatrice's songs were born, where she was truly herself. She sat down at the mixing desk, touched the buttons, imagining how she worked here, creating her albums. On the table was a notebook with an unfinished song, the one she'd composed a couple months before she died, the one Noah had videotaped. I read the last lines. "And when all the masks are off, when all the roles have been played, we're the only ones left, naked souls under the starry sky. No pretenses, no expectations, just us, finally real." Tears streamed down my cheeks. Beatrice had been searching for authenticity her whole life, searching for a way to be herself, without masks, without compromise, and she found that way in music, in songs, in this lake house. But not with me, never with me. I walked out onto the veranda and sat in a chair, looking out at the dark surface of the lake. The stars reflected in the water, creating the illusion of infinity. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird cried out. Noah was right. My remorse was too late. I had lost my daughter twice, first by alienating her in life, then by losing her physically, forever, and no belated gesture could change that. Couldn't bring back the missed years, the conversations that never happened, the understanding that never came in time. The people gathered today knew my daughter better than I did, saw her for who she really was, talented, passionate, sincere, heard her voice, her laughter, her anger, her pain, and I, her mother, lived next to a ghost, a version of Beatrice that she created just for me, safe, acceptable, unquestioned. My control, my expectations, my criticism had built a wall between us that we could never break through. And now I was alone, with memories that turned out to be an illusion, with a daughter I never really knew, with remorse that no one needed anymore. I looked at the stars reflecting in the lake and thought of the last lines in Beatrice's song. It's just that we're finally real. She had found her authenticity, her truth, her voice, without me, in spite of me, and that was my greatest failure as a mother. With a heavy sigh, I got up and walked back into the house. Tomorrow, a new life would begin. A life with the realization of mistakes that could never be undone. With the memory of a daughter I had lost twice. With the music that remained the only bridge between us. I closed the studio door, but I didn't turn off the light. Let it burn. Like a small beacon for someone who had finally found the courage to be herself and whose voice now resounded only in the recordings and memories of those who actually listened.